Curses have been part of human civilization for thousands of years, from whispered hexes in ancient temples to generational dooms that destroyed entire bloodlines. Some were punishments from gods, others were weapons of grief, and a few didn't even require the person casting them to know they were doing it. Today I'm breaking down every forbidden curse from mythology and history, and what makes each one terrifying. Starting with one that's been haunting humanity longer than written language: the evil eye. Here's what makes this curse different from every other one on this list. Nobody invented it. Civilizations that had zero contact with each other, separated by oceans and centuries, all independently arrived at the exact same fear that a glance from the wrong person could destroy your health, your livestock, your children, your entire life. We're talking Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, African, and South Asian cultures, all converging on this belief as far back as 3000 BCE. That's over 5,000 years ago, predating most organized religion. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. In many traditions, the person casting the evil eye doesn't even need to know they're doing it. No ritual, no incantation, no intent required. You could curse someone just by looking at them with envy and never realize the damage you caused. That makes it unique among every curse we'll cover today, because every other curse has a caster who chose to act. Pliny the Elder documented specific individuals in Roman society who had double pupils and were considered literal public hazards. These weren't folktales. These were named tracked people whose gaze was believed capable of killing. The fear got so deeply embedded that protective countermeasures became an industry. The Nazar, that blue eye-shaped stone you've probably seen hanging in shops, originated as a direct defense against the evil eye and spread across more than 40 modern cultures. It's one of the only ancient curse countermeasures that survived into the modern world completely intact. So either every major civilization on Earth experienced the same mass delusion independently, or they were all observing something they couldn't explain. But the evil eye is a curse without a story. Pandora's curse, on the other hand, came with a punishment designed to doom every human who ever lived. Pandora's curse on mankind. Zeus didn't just punish humanity, he built the punishment from scratch, gave her a name, and sent her down as a gift. Pandora wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. She was a person created specifically to deliver suffering to the entire human race, which means she's simultaneously the curse, the delivery system, and depending on how you read it, the first victim. Here's the thing, this story goes back to Hesiod's Theogony, roughly 700 BCE, making it one of the oldest curse narratives in Western literature. And the reason Zeus did it? Prometheus stole fire and gave it to humans. Zeus's response wasn't to punish Prometheus alone. He wanted every human who would ever live to pay for it. But here's where it gets darker than you'd expect. Pandora carried a sealed jar, not a box. That box mistranslation comes from a 16th century scholar named Erasmus who used the wrong Latin word, and it stuck for 500 years. Inside the jar was every form of suffering humans would ever experience. Disease, grief, famine, death, all of it. Pandora opened it and everything escaped. Everything except hope. And that detail is the part scholars still argue about thousands of years later. Was hope the one mercy Zeus allowed? Or was it the cruelest element of the entire curse? The thing that keeps humans enduring unbearable suffering instead of simply giving up? Ancient Greeks genuinely debated this, and nobody ever settled it. There's also a reading most people miss entirely. Hesiod essentially wrote a story where a woman's curiosity causes all human suffering. Scholars have pointed out that this narrative is structurally almost identical to the Eve story in Genesis, both written around the same historical period, both blaming feminine curiosity for the fall of mankind. But Pandora's curse at least targeted all of humanity equally. The next curse on this list was far more personal and far less deserved. The curse of Medusa. Here's the thing about Medusa. She wasn't born a monster. In the version of the myth that most people know, the one Ovid wrote in his Metamorphoses, she was a mortal woman. Beautiful, actually. And her crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Poseidon assaulted her inside Athena's temple. That's not disputed. That's the text. But here's where it gets dark. Athena's response wasn't to punish Poseidon, the god who violated her sacred space, she punished Medusa, the victim. Athena turned her into a gorgon, serpents for hair, bronze hands, golden wings, and a gaze that turned anyone who looked at her directly into stone. Medusa lost everything because a god attacked her, and another god blamed her for it. But that's not even where the injustice ends. Perseus eventually tracked her down and cut off her head. You'd think death would be the end of the curse. It wasn't. Her severed head kept its petrifying power. Athena took it and mounted it on her shield, the Aegis, turning Medusa's suffering into a literal weapon. The woman who was cursed for being a victim became a tool of war even after she was dead. Her punishment outlasted her life. Now, it's worth noting that not every ancient source tells it this way. Hesiod's Theogony, written centuries before Ovid, treats all three Gorgons as born monsters with zero tragic backstory. But the version that survived culturally, the one people remember, is Ovid's, the one where she's a victim. That says something. And in a twist that would have been unthinkable in ancient Greece, modern culture has completely flipped the narrative. Medusa's face has become one of the most recognized symbols of feminine rage and survivor identity. The curse that was meant to isolate and dehumanize her became a symbol of reclaimed power. The gods silenced her. Thousands of years later, she's louder than ever. But if you think Medusa had it bad, wait until you hear about another woman Apollo decided to punish for saying no. The curse of Cassandra. Apollo gave Cassandra the gift of true prophecy. Every single vision she had was accurate. Every warning she gave was correct, but when she rejected his romantic advances, he didn't take the gift back. He did something far worse. He let her keep it and made sure nobody would ever believe a word she said. Think about that for a second. Her power wasn't removed, it was made completely meaningless. She could see the future with perfect clarity, but the moment she opened her mouth, people treated her like she was insane. Truth-telling and lying produced the exact same result. For the ancient Greeks, that wasn't just punishment, that was social death. And she was right about everything. She predicted the Trojan War. She screamed that the Trojan horse was a trap, literally begged her people not to bring it inside the walls. She foresaw Troy's complete destruction down to the fire and the slaughter. Nobody listened. Not once. She watched every single catastrophe unfold exactly as she described it, powerless to change any of it. But here's the part that makes this curse perfect in its cruelty. After Troy fell, Cassandra was taken as a war prize by Agamemnon. She knew what was waiting for them. She predicted that Clytemnestra would murder them both the moment they arrived home. She told anyone who would listen. Nobody believed her. And Clytemnestra killed her, exactly as she said. She predicted her own death and still couldn't prevent it. That's the double bind that makes Cassandra's curse arguably the most psychologically devastating punishment in all of mythology. Apollo didn't need to harm her body. He trapped her mind in a prison where knowing the truth was indistinguishable from knowing nothing at all. The frustration, the isolation, the slow erosion of watching disaster after disaster prove you right while everyone calls you crazy. Her curse became so universally recognizable as a human experience that it entered clinical psychology. The Cassandra complex describes situations where accurate warnings are systematically ignored. Thousands of years later, we're still naming real psychological phenomena after her suffering. But at least Cassandra's curse left her with nothing she didn't want. The next one gave someone exactly what they wished for, and it destroyed everything they loved. The Midas touch. Most curses on this list were punishments handed down by angry gods. Midas did this to himself. Here's the thing, Midas was a real person. He was a Phrygian king who ruled from roughly 738 to 696 BCE, a genuine historical figure with archaeological evidence to back it up. But the Golden Touch? That's pure myth, and it's one of the most perfectly constructed cautionary tales ever written. The story goes like this. Dionysus, the god of wine, offered Midas a reward for showing hospitality to one of his followers. Midas could have asked for anything. Wisdom, immortality, anything. He asked for the power to turn everything he touched into gold. Dionysus granted it. And for about 5 minutes, Midas was the happiest man alive. But then he tried to eat, his bread turned to gold, his wine turned to gold. Every sip, every bite, every grain of rice became a solid metal lump the moment it touched his lips. In some versions of the myth, he reaches out to embrace his own daughter and she transforms into a golden statue right in his arms. He got exactly what he asked for, and it was killing him. Eventually, Midas begged Dionysus to take it back. Dionysus told him to bathe in the river Pactolus, and the curse washed away into the water. The river's sand supposedly turned gold as a result. And here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because the Pactolus was a real river in modern-day Turkey, and it actually did carry alluvial gold dust. Ancient Greeks essentially invented this myth to explain a geological phenomenon. That's mythology doing double duty as science. But the wildest part of this curse isn't the myth itself. It's what happened to the phrase afterward. Today, if someone says you have the Midas touch, that's a compliment. It means you're brilliant with money. Everything you invest in turns to profit, which is a complete inversion of the original meaning. The myth is literally about a man who starved to death surrounded by infinite wealth, and we turn that into a LinkedIn endorsement. Unlike the curses we've covered so far, Midas's was brief and reversible. He suffered, he learned, he washed it off. But that brevity is the point. Ancient audiences didn't need eternal punishment to make the lesson stick. Sometimes you just need a man dying of thirst while holding a solid gold cup to understand that desire without limits becomes its own destruction. And if a self-inflicted curse with an easy exit feels almost gentle compared to what we've seen so far, that's about to change dramatically. Because Prometheus didn't get a river to wash his punishment away. He got an eagle, a rock, and 30,000 years. Prometheus's eternal torment. Every other curse on this list punishes someone for doing something wrong. Prometheus got punished for doing something right. He stole fire from the gods and handed it directly to humanity. Not a weapon, not forbidden knowledge, not some dark secret. Fire. The single tool that enabled cooking, warmth, metalworking, agriculture, and basically every building block of human civilization. Prometheus looked at humanity struggling in the dark and decided to help. And Zeus made him pay for it with his body. The punishment was as creative as it was brutal. Zeus had Prometheus chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, completely immobilized. Then he sent a giant eagle to tear open his torso and devour his liver, every single day. And because Prometheus was immortal, his liver regenerated overnight so the whole thing could start fresh the next morning. But here's the part that makes this curse hit differently from vague eternal suffering descriptions. Aeschylus actually put a number on it. 30,000 years. Not forever, not until the end of time. 30,000 years of waking up, knowing exactly what's coming, feeling your organs ripped out, healing and doing it again. That specificity transforms it from abstract mythology into something your brain can actually process, and that makes it so much worse. The irony is what makes Prometheus the most tragic figure on this entire list. His compassion was literally the crime. Being generous, being selfless, caring about creatures weaker than himself, that's what earned him millennia of daily organ consumption. Being good cost him everything. Heracles eventually killed the eagle and broke the chains, though ancient sources can't agree on whether Zeus actually pardoned Prometheus or simply allowed the release as part of a negotiated deal. Either way, freedom came from a hero's intervention, not divine mercy, and Prometheus' story didn't end with the Greeks. Mary Shelley subtitled Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus. Percy Shelley wrote an entire play recasting him as a revolutionary standing against tyranny. No other cursed figure in mythology has been so consistently reborn across centuries as a symbol of defiance against unjust authority. But Prometheus suffered alone. The next curse didn't just destroy one person, it poisoned an entire family bloodline for generations. The House of Atreus. Every other curse on this list has a clear villain. This one doesn't, and that's what makes it the most disturbing entry we've covered so far. The House of Atreus curse spans 4 generations of a single Greek family, and every generation ends the same way, in blood. It starts with a man named Tantalus, who decided to test the gods by killing his own son Pelops, cooking him, and serving him as a meal at a divine banquet. The gods weren't fooled. They reassembled Pelops, brought him back to life, and cursed Tantalus's entire bloodline for eternity. But here's where it gets complicated. The curse didn't just punish Tantalus. It infected everyone who came after him, and each generation's violence directly triggered the next. Tantalus' descendant Atreus took revenge on his brother Thyestes by murdering Thyestes' children and serving them to him as dinner. The exact same crime Tantalus committed. Atreus' son Agamemnon then sacrificed his own daughter Iphigenia to get favorable winds for the Trojan War. Therefore his wife Clytemnestra murdered him when he came home. Therefore their son Orestes murdered Clytemnestra to avenge his father. Every killing was both justified and monstrous. Every victim was also a perpetrator. Nobody in this family is innocent, but nobody is fully guilty either, because every act of violence was a response to the one before it, and that cycle would have continued forever if not for something genuinely surprising. Athena herself intervened during Orestes' trial in Athens and declared that the rule of law would replace blood vengeance. The ancient Athenians literally understood this myth as the origin story for why legal courts exist. The entire justice system born from a family so broken that divine intervention was the only thing that could stop the killing. But here's the part that scholars still argue about. Was the curse ever actually supernatural? Because if you remove the gods entirely, the pattern still holds. A family raised in violence produces children who commit violence. Each generation inherits the trauma of the last and repeats it, believing they have no choice. You don't need Zeus to explain that. You just need psychology, which means the House of Atreus might be the most honest curse on this list because it works whether you believe in gods or not. But the next curse on our list attached itself to something far more tangible than a bloodline. It attached itself to gold. Andvari's curse. Every curse we've talked about so far targets a person, a bloodline, a specific punishment for a specific crime. Andvari's curse doesn't work like that. Andvari's curse lives inside an object, and it infects whoever touches it. Here's the story. Loki killed an otter that turned out to be someone's son. To pay the blood debt, he needed gold. So he tracked down a dwarf named Andvari and stole his entire hoard. Every last piece, including a magical ring the dwarf treasured above everything else. Andvari begged Loki to leave the ring. Loki took it anyway. So Andvari cursed the gold itself. Not Loki, not the family receiving the payment. The metal. Every coin, every bar, every piece of that hoard now carried destruction inside it like a disease. But here's where the body count starts climbing. The gold was handed over as compensation to a man named Hreidmar. His own son, Fafnir, murdered him to take it. Fafnir then became so consumed by paranoid obsession that he literally transformed into a dragon, coiling around the hoard in a cave for years, guarding wealth he could never spend. His brother Regan spent decades plotting to reclaim it, manipulating the hero Sigurd into killing the dragon for him. Sigurd succeeded, claimed the gold, and was eventually betrayed and killed himself. The curse consumed the entire Volsung line, one possessor at a time, each one convinced they'd be the exception. And that's what makes this curse fundamentally different from anything the Greeks ever produced. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care if you're innocent. It functions like a contagion, spreading through contact with cursed material rather than targeting a family or fulfilling a prophecy. You touch the gold, you're infected, period. The reach of this story is staggering. Richard Wagner built his entire Ring cycle, 4 operas spanning 15 hours of performance, directly on Andvari's curse and the Volsung saga. A single production regularly costs $20 million to stage. One of the most expensive and ambitious works of art in human history traces its entire narrative back to a dwarf losing his ring to a trickster god. Some scholars argue Andvari wasn't even a victim, that he cursed the gold deliberately, knowing exactly where it would go and who it would destroy, turning Loki's theft into a weapon more devastating than anything the dwarf could have done with the hoard himself. But cursed gold spreading death through touch sounds almost quaint compared to what happens when you open something that was sealed shut 3,000 years ago. The curse of the Pharaoh's tomb. Every other curse on this list comes from a story. This one might actually be real. Curse inscriptions on Egyptian tombs aren't some modern invention or Hollywood creation. They're documented funerary practice dating back to the Middle Kingdom around 1550 BCE. Carved directly into tomb walls, these warnings explicitly promise death, disease, and supernatural destruction to anyone who disturbed the dead. This wasn't superstition scribbled in the margins. It was institutionalized. Priests wrote them. Pharaohs commissioned them. The entire Egyptian funerary system treated tomb curses as standard operating procedure for thousands of years. But here's where it gets interesting. In 1922, Howard Carter cracked open the tomb of Tutankhamun, and within 5 months, Lord Carnarvon, the man who financed the entire excavation, was dead. Over the next decade, roughly 10 to 12 people connected to the dig died under various circumstances. Newspapers went absolutely feral. Headlines screamed about ancient vengeance reaching across millennia to strike down grave robbers. The reality is more complicated. Howard Carter himself, the guy who literally opened the sarcophagus with his own hands, lived another 16 years. Several other team members survived well into old age. The media cherry-picked the deaths that fit the narrative and conveniently ignored everyone who was fine. It's one of the earliest documented cases of a news cycle manufacturing a myth in real time, selectively reporting facts to build a story that was more exciting than the truth. But here's the part that makes this curse genuinely unsettling. The scientific explanation is scarier than the supernatural one. Researchers have found that ancient sealed tombs contain dangerous concentrations of Aspergillus niger and other toxic molds, bacteria, and chemical compounds that thrive in airtight environments over thousands of years. When excavators broke those seals, they inhaled pathogens that had been brewing since before Rome existed. The Egyptians may not have summoned divine wrath. They may have engineered a biological defense system that functioned exactly like a curse, killing intruders through contamination rather than magic. Think about that for a second. A civilization built protective mechanisms into their tombs that remained lethal for over 3,000 years. That's not superstition. That's terrifying sophistication. No other entry on this list sits in this space, simultaneously a cultural practice, a media fabrication, and a potential bioweapon. It's the most grounded curse we've covered, and the most ambiguous. But if you want a curse with zero ambiguity, one spoken by a grieving mother that killed a god exactly when she said it would, that's next. Gandhari's curse on Krishna. Every curse on this list has one thing in common. A god punished a mortal, a divine being wielded supernatural power, or some enchanted object carried the weight of magic. Every single one. Until now. After the Mahabharata war ended, the battlefield was silent. The Kaurava army was annihilated. All 100 of Gandhari's sons were dead. Every last one. And when the grieving queen finally stood before Krishna, the man she held responsible for engineering the war's outcome, she didn't reach for a weapon or call upon divine authority. She was a mortal woman with no magical power, no divine backing, and no sacred incantation. She just spoke. She told Krishna that he and his entire Yadava clan would destroy themselves within 36 years, that he would die alone, killed in an undignified way, struck down by a hunter's arrow like an animal. And here's where it gets complicated, because Krishna, described in Hindu theology as an avatar of Vishnu, essentially a god walking the earth in human form, heard every word of that curse and accepted it. No resistance, no counter curse. He acknowledged it as just. 36 years later, a hunter named Jara mistook Krishna's foot for a deer and shot him with an arrow. The curse fulfilled itself to the exact year, but was it even a curse? That's the question Hindu philosophy has wrestled with for centuries. Gandhari had no supernatural mechanism. Her words carried binding power because they were righteous, not because she was a sorceress. The philosophical interpretation says her curse and Krishna's karma were already aligned. She didn't change destiny, she articulated it. She gave voice to what the universe already demanded, which means her curse might have been a prophecy delivered through the purest grief a mother can feel. Think about that for a second. Across every tradition we've covered today, Greek, Norse, Egyptian, Hindu, this is the only curse where a mortal's emotional authority held binding power over a deity who could have prevented his own death and chose not to. No magic. No divine intervention. Just a mother who lost everything, speaking truth so absolute that even a god couldn't deny it. Maybe grief itself is the oldest and most binding curse of all. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.